So anyway, this one came to me not running, and it had some other miscellaneous issues. What I've got to do now is figure out why it doesn't run. Now, I can tell you it really doesn't have a lot of compression. But when you look right inside, yeah, so you can see it, the piston's got some marks on it, but I mean, it doesn't look terrible, you know? And I'm not really seeing score marks on the rings either. Next thing is, let's see if we got spark. And I know I've got fuel because the plug gets wet. So I'm back to compression. And the compression can be either primary or secondary. Primary being what's in the crankcase, secondary being the top end. I'm going to go with secondary right now, but let's continue. Now there's another possibility, and that's that the flywheel has spun, and even though it has spark, it doesn't have spark at the right time. Slim possibility, but possibility just the same. But as I learned the hard way with that 357, one of the first things I'm going to do is do a vac test on this thing, you know, before I even clean it up, because if it does have a bad seal downstairs, I want to know sooner than later. I spent so much time fighting that other saw. Pretty clever, huh? That goes right over the exhaust, and I just used a shorter of the two, you know, exhaust mounting screws. And what I'm going to do is bring it up to, I don't know, about 7 pounds. If it drops 1 pound a minute, that's within spec. Alright, let's start this. I've got it at 7 pounds. Okay, I just went to 6. So, although it doesn't have a overt leak, that's a fail. And this is one of them deals where time is money, and for me to bust it all the way down and figure out if the bearing is gone, one of those nylon cage deals. You can get these things for cheap, the whole bottom end. So I'm just going to build this off around a new bottom end and not screw with it. That's my decision, and then at least I can get it out today. But if I was to bust it down and push the bearings out and put seals in and all that kind of stuff, I mean, I'd easily eat up the time in dollars that would cost just to buy this from the get-go. One of the nice things about what Husqvarna has done with this is it comes with a crank, bearings, everything's just all assembled. I don't have to assemble the cases or press bearings or anything. For the money that they sell this for, it makes absolutely no sense to do so. So I'm going to continue just doing my due diligence and just run a quick test on the common service tool and see if whether it can give me any clues. But I want to do the tests. Hear that clicking? That means the valve is working. Yeah, it's about 21 degrees centigrade. Interesting, when I run the choke, it gets to 48% throttle. And if you look at the throttle, that goes 100% down to 0, so that all works. So pretty much, if you look at the tests, everything's fine. If you go into operating history right here, and it gives you sort of the overview, but it also gives you error codes. The one error code that I like to that I look for first is 13, and it's got several 13s. I'm a little surprised that the carburetor hadn't tried to adjust to it. That I find a little bit unnerving, because usually when you see a 13 error code, or where that's about, you know, air leaks and running lean, usually you start seeing these numbers right here run down to single digits as the carburetor tries to fatten up the mixture to compensate. And I did not see that. Did not see that. I reset it now, but the point is I did not see that before. So error code 13 says lean come down. Otherwise, when you drop the idle, it kind of revs a little bit before it drops. Something you see on a lot of these. The engine speed does not go down slowly when you release the throttle trigger. Throttle is not completely closed during idling. Leakage on engine, which mine did. Fuel has more than 25% alcohol, which just does not. So what it recommended based on the error code 13 is what I did, was make a pressure test of the motor, and it failed. But still, even with the leak down test that I did, it doesn't tell me that it shouldn't run. It said it should run goofy. This thing will not start. It simply will not start. So I really didn't find anything with the common service tool that would give me a clue as to why it won't start. Okay? So this is one of those cases where the common service tool confirmed what I already knew, but didn't give me any clues to why it simply won't start. Now when I pull it over, you know, I get a hot spark. So the kind of things that I'm down to, I didn't do a formal compression test, but I know the compression is low. There was a lot of fuel in the bottom end, and there's a lot of fuel in the carburetor. So that tells me intuitively that I'm getting fuel. That's not my problem. Spark test, maybe a more sophisticated spark test, although when I pull it over I get a lot of blue spark. Doesn't mean it's happening at the right time, but I'm not getting that kind of backfire, that kind of sound you get when the timing is off on these things. So right now I've kind of stuck with compression. That's the only thing I can think of where the compression simply isn't high enough to let this thing light off at low RPMs. So anyway, that as a backdrop, I found a couple of interesting things when I was cleaning up this. I don't know if you can see it right there, but the piston is actually broken. There it is. You look really carefully on that piston. It's broken. I mean, I've never seen that before. That is absolutely a first for me, right there. It's broken, and the ring gap has gotten to the point where it can't support the ring anymore. Seeing as way that piston was damaged, and I don't see a reason for it to be damaged that way, I'm going to speculate that something let loose in the bottom end. It's been a trend, you know. So I'm just going to start swapping parts over and trying to piece together this saw. In no particular order, I'm going to start with the ignition system. And you got to do this kind of in two steps. You kind of have to lay the ignition system in there, then put the flywheel on, and then space the ignition system. You know what I'm saying? Someone's trying to get a hold of me. A lot of these threaded holes are not threaded. You pretty much have to self-tap them. It's kind of interesting. This is one of them. I'm going to gamble with this ignition, and then I'm going to be really, really upset if I put all this together and I still don't have a running saw. One thing I can rule out is a sheared keyway on the flywheel. That's obviously not sheared. This thing's got good power. This guy right here, it's one of those things that you might forget. You will only forget it once. Husqvarna, I don't know, sometimes I get annoyed. This is one of those times. This is a pretty chintzy piece. It really is for a pro level saw. But really it's pretty simple. It just goes in kind of like that. I mean, it's really easy to work on, you know. Just, that's it. Really the end of it right there, just like that. Okay, it's not a through hole, so I don't have as much to worry about. So I'll make a point, those aren't through holes, you know. So self-tapping those screws is not going to leave some chips in your bottom end like you might be concerned about. At least I would be. I'm pretty sure to have somebody argue with me on the right order of events because somebody told somebody else it was an easier way to do this. Yeah, I mean, if you put the hoses through this first before you ran that on there, you'd probably save yourself a little bit of hassle. And it just popped right in there. No big deal. That one did too. So, that just, yeah. That's much ado about nothing. Well, it's a week later, and I still have to get that saw completed. The 562, I had to stop, and life's events kind of took over and didn't have time. In between then and now, just a whole lot of things happened. Some good, some not. Lost a horse, and since we didn't have a way of moving the horse, we ended up with a horse trailer and a different truck, and I traded my silver truck in for the dark blue Dodge. Really like that truck. And that's a 1992 GMC 1-ton with a 454, and it actually has no rust, either on the frame or on the body. So we're going to use that as a starting point to build a truck to pull the horse trailer, the hay trailer for delivering round bales, and it came with a camper, and I'll show a picture of that sometime in the future when we go down and get it. But and just the goings on between the hay and some life events that weren't very cool, but just part of life. Just haven't had any time at all to work on this saw. So I need to finish it today, get it running. Bob's coming tomorrow, and we'll do one of our minis. I've got, I don't know, 3 or 4 562s I've got to build. So I'll be busy doing that. You know, it's got to the point where if it doesn't pass a vacuum test on these 562s, Husky has these case assemblies for really cheap. And then rather than push out bearings and seals, it's easier just to buy the assembled case. That's what I did in this one here. Is got that assembled case, and we're just going to build a saw up around that. You know, it just makes things quite a bit easier. And I got the handle put on. I got a bearing in there, and I need to warm up this piston. We're going to put a new piston in this saw. I sort of scratched up the bore in order to give it some crosshatch. Now this is not going to be a modified saw, it's going to be stock, and it'll be stock in the sense that I'm not going to do anything to the piston or cylinder, but what I will do is I will change the top cover. I'll cut some material away here. I'm going to open up the hole in the muffler just a little bit too to see if I can't get some heat out of the motor a little bit more, and I'm going to try something a little bit different than what I did in the past. You know, they're a little bit awkward, so I'm going to try to do as much assembly with the cylinder up and out as possible before I set the thing down in there. Now these pistons, when they come with that circlip already installed. It's better to have those in there without any tab at all, because these are really high revving saws. I mean, stock, they're a 14,000 RPM saw, and they have that rev boost, which will let them temporarily go to almost 16,000 RPMs. Definitely getting ready for retirement. That's part of what this is all about, is, you know, with the trucks and things. I'm trying to get to a point where I can retire from the county and spend more time on saws. I kind of miss it. I mean, I haven't done as much saw work as I usually do this time of the year, just simply because I just haven't had any time. The way the rain was at the beginning of the year, we put a little oil in the bottom end, but I like to have a little oil down in there on those bearings. One of the issues I've seen on the 562s in the past was that wasn't flat. With these new cases, they're definitely flat. There's no step right there. I've seen as much as 10 to 15,000 step on some of the early ones. Yeah, I'm working on saws like this one here that are work saws for real. Stick with OEM. This is the gasket kit. I'm only going to use the base gasket and the muffler gasket here. But the part number is as displayed. A piston kit, and it comes with a ring and a wrist pin, but not a bearing. Okay, so, and that part number is as displayed right there, 505-2155-02. Arrow points to the exhaust. That's already been installed, so I have to start from this side. And, look at that, it just slides right in. No, I'm pretty sure that the reason they give you two of these is because the first one you're gonna go bing and lose it. Yeah. There's a bear crap in the woods. Of course I'm gonna use this stuff. Especially knowing that some of these have had some sealing issues. I'm putting this on the cylinder side because it does sort of squeeze that flange, and those tabs have kind of got to go in those slots in the cylinder. And it's kind of an interesting thing they do there. But like always, the ring goes on with the recess to the top because it has to capture that locating pin. So we're going to do that. And if you watch my videos, I try not to show this boring stuff, but little details like that you got to know. Of course, the other thing I do, and I don't know if it matters much, but I just put a thin film of oil right around the top there, around that ring. When this cylinder goes on, basically I'm going to get it on the piston here pretty quick. A couple things I need to do is this bracket kind of thing here, this plastic piece right here. You've got to get that fuel hose hooked in there while it's up. You're not going to get it easily when it's down. And the same with the throttle. It's a lot easier to get it when it's a little bit away from the cases before it settles down inside. Same with the carburetor. It's easier to get this on while things are up and out just a little bit. At least that's what I used to find, and I'm not thinking it's going to change now. What's going to change now is if I can physically do what I did even last year with my hands being as numb as they are. Okay, it's on there. Okay. It's up in there. Make sure. Oh, that's the other thing, is you got to get this wire in its clip. Let me move a little further down. Okay, I've got that in there. Now I'm going to get the carburetor on here before I get too much further into this. It's a lot easier getting it on here So what I did was I got the little worm on, and I hooked up the kill switch right there. So I also got the choke where the little spring is right where it's supposed to be. So it's got to be able to push that back. See that little wire goes underneath the choke, like that. Still intact.
This holiday weekend has been brought to you by the blood, sweat, and tears of...
Okay, get that throttle cable right in there. Alright, so kind of the checklist. Throttle cable's on, fuel hose is on, settling down in there. And I also have the choke on the right side of the wire. I've got the plug in. So at this point in time, really, I'm going to put the carburetor screws in. And again, this is not something you crank on. You make these kind of firm, but you don't go crazy with them. It's tight enough, I think. Now, I have all that together. Now the cylinder has to settle down, and then we'll attach the rest of this stuff. You know, my big old clumsy hands makes that look a little harder than it might be for you younger folks. But alright. I'm feeling pretty good about this. These hoses on. I guess where I've come down on these saws is they're really no harder to work on than other saws, but you have to do things like what I did with the pre-assembly. You really do. That is the difference between a real pain in the neck and an easy build. You know, where you get it all together instead of trying to push it all down there, then put the carb on, then put this on. That gets to be really tough because it's really hard to work in there. But if you can do it while the cylinder is up just a little bit and kind of like pre-assemble as I did, you with younger hands and fingers will do it easier. It actually goes together pretty quickly and pretty easily, as you can see. Well, you can't even tell something happened inside there. But I just took out that restriction. I punched an extra hole right there. That's it. Let some more heat out. That's the gain. It's not going to make a whole lot more power. Kind of an interesting pattern right there where it left a little gasket. That goes up against the cylinder. Can't tell you how many saws I've seen where the gasket's put on the cylinder side instead of the muffler side. You know, just don't know. I guess it makes sense, right? But that's not where they go. Sometimes those little cylindrical things in those washers pop off. And on this gasket it goes this way because you have to have clearance for that that ridge right there. So you pretty much have to put it on that one way.
Tantalize your taste buds with their new garlic
You know?
Parmesan honey barbecue or any of
Warning about the, what was it, a Babe Ruth professional model baseball bat signed by Babe.
They have to go in at the right orientation. But sometimes I wonder, you know, like for example, you drop that cylinder, say 30 thousandths, right? The angle of the screw is this way, but the angle of the cylinder is not 90 degrees, you know? Even if it was, now the cylinder moves down this way, which means now these screws, if they're tight to that bushing, that whole muffler needs to move down, or it exerts a little force up on that cylinder, because there really isn't any slop at all in the muffler. You know, little stuff like that you got to pay attention to. And I check it, and on one saw I actually relieved the bottom two in order to let the muffler settle down with no stress, because I believed at the time, true or false, that by cranking on the muffler that way, that would have exerted some force on my cylinder, so I chose not to. Now, that saw hasn't come back, so I don't know whether or not that was a successful endeavor or not. Well, I guess no news is good news, isn't it? You don't want to go too tight with these things. Just get that aluminum, or that aluminum right out. Well, I'm going to have to rob from my junk pile, but I need the parts for the chain brake, so this one has to lose some of its parts. There's a little piece that goes there that I can't find. I don't think the other one had it on. Just like a little cover that kind of helps hold this thing in. You know? This will go like this. Inside out instead of outside in. I don't know what you guys do. I just take the screwdriver, and I stick it right in that little slot and turn it down. Apply torque. Then I put that other side on, so it goes on like that. That's what I do. This side first, put the screwdriver there, turn it down, and then put these on. One thing I have to do is put on the little plastic latches, you know. Now this is, again, one of those things that kind of unique to these saws. Spark plug got to go right up in here. There's sort of a place right here that holds the wire where it goes on there. You know, I wonder, makes me wonder whether or not that's in response to all those 372s where, get some slack. The other thing is you got to remember to have these two little locating pins go up into the two holes on that. But I gotta wonder sometimes if that bracket is in response to all the 372s that had their plug wires hitting the cylinder, you know. I've gone over that a bunch of times. It's beginning to look like a saw, isn't it? Now, I don't know how much I lost, but the thing ran out of battery. And I had to rob the parts bin for that little spring and detent for the chain brake. And I don't have that little plastic cup that holds that down, which is going to be a problem. I have to get one. And I put this plate on. I got to put the screw in there. Alright. Clutch. About the only way to get that handle on there is to do it from the front. Got to make sure that that strap is there. See it? Try to do it without making a big mess. Sometimes that's easier said than done. But at least I can try, right? Okay, I'll throw a total light bar on it for tomorrow and hope it fires. And I'm going to order the 2 pieces that it needs to finish it off. And then let the fellow who owns it know that he now has a saw. Well, that's encouraging. I have a hunch this is going to be a good running saw. See if it restarts. Yep, that's going to be a good runner right there. That sounds right. Comes right back to idle the way it's supposed to. You know? Which means it has no more air leak. And I honestly believe that what I've seen on these is a little bit leaking underneath the cylinder right by the transfer ports. And that's stock. I'm going to make a video. I got a lot of video to edit. Moral of the story is, when you have a deal like this, if you just go through the fundamentals and basics of analysis, when you have a dead saw, you save yourself days, sometimes weeks. So, how's that? The song comes to an end, and so does this video.